Your Human and You. Written by Mad Max the Black. Chapter 11. Bonding with Your Human, Part 2.
I must say, Miss Buckle,
Lotus said as she slowly worked her way up and down my body.
you certainly have a very fine human stallion here. Wherever did you find him? He was a gift.
Twilight moaned as Alo found a particularly sore spot on her back.
From Princess Celestia. He is certainly one of the more muscular humans we have seen.
Alo added, glancing at me.
I wonder where the princess ever found him. You can actually thank Rainbow Dash for that.
Twilight groaned.
She's taken to play wrestling with him whenever she gets the chance. And he allows that?
Lotus asked, the surprise evident in her voice as her hooves stopped for a second.
He doesn't become violent with her? No, he just plays along with her. He stops when she does, and they have yet to actually injure each other.
I heard Lotus and Alo murmur to themselves, obviously impressed.
This is the first time I have ever heard of a human actually tolerating a pony attacking them, even if it was only in good humor.
Alo said as Lotus resumed her work.
He must have a great deal of patience to behave as such.
A peaceful silence fell across the room as the mares continued to work their magic, only broken by a soft groan from Twilight. The silence continued until Lotus found a particular sore spot on the base of my neck. As her hoof pushed down upon the knot, I let out a loud groan. She lifted her hoof immediately and jumped back, inhaling sharply. Confused, I raised my head and looked over at her, trying to get my mind working again after being caught up in a blissful haze. She gazed back at me, a terrified look in her eyes.
What happened?
Alo asked, her voice tense. My glance over to her found her eyes glued on me, apprehension on her face. Twilight's head was up and she was staring at me as well, a worried and confused expression on her face.
I don't know.
Lotus stammered.
I found a tense spot, but when I started working on it, he growled at me.
At this, Twilight rolled her eyes and sighed.
I don't think he was growling at you, Lotus.
Twilight said, laying her head back down.
If he isn't violent towards Rainbow when she attacks him, I don't think you have to worry about him getting hostile towards you.
The blue mare stared at me hesitantly before slowly approaching me, her eyes watching for any signs of movement. As she approached, I laid my head back down, trying to look submissive. Reaching the table, she placed a tentative hoof on my back again. When I didn't move or react, she slowly began working on my muscles again. I sighed as I slowly drifted back into a blissful state. Lotus giggled nervously as she resumed working on my neck.
I apologize for my behavior, Miss Buckle,
She said.
It was rather unprofessional of me.
I groaned softly again as she worked the muscle. She paused for a second, but continued her work. I could tell she was trying to be more gentle than before, and apparently it showed as well, because after several seconds, Twilight spoke up.
Lotus, is something wrong? You seem to be tenser than before.
The hooves paused again and I heard a sigh above me.
I'm sorry, Miss Buckle. It's that, well, a few weeks ago I was working on a human for one of our other clients. I'm not sure what caused it, if I hit a tender spot or was overly rough with him, but he suddenly attacked me. What?
Twilight exclaimed as she sat up, ignoring Alo's attempt to get her to lay back down.
My sister and the client were able to gain control over him, but the damage was already done.
Alo said, motioning to the bandage around her stomach.
I ended up in the hospital, and he ended up having to be put down, and we haven't heard from the client since. How bad was the injury?
Twilight asked, allowing Alo to push her gently back into the table.
Nothing permanent, I hope. No, nothing permanent. Just some slight pain every now and then.
Lotus sighed, absent-mindedly stroking my back with a hoof.
It's just that, ever since then, I have been rather nervous around humans. I realize that not all of them are violent, but given what has happened, nobody can blame you for being nervous.
Twilight finished, turning her head to the side and smiling up at Lotus. Her gaze drifted down to me, and the look in her eyes changed to something I couldn't quite recognize. Her eyes closed slightly, her smile softened, and a small blush appeared on her cheeks.
I don't think you have to worry around Max here.
she said, the tenderness clear in her voice.
I don't think he could ever hurt you.
I blushed slightly at her statement. Where did that come from? I thought, averting my eyes from Twilight. The floor suddenly became very interesting. I know Twilight and I are friends, but that seemed more personal.
Yes,
Lotus said, stroking my back gently as she smiled.
I can see that now. He truly is an amazing human. He is the first human I have worked with since the attack, and so far he has been more behaved than any human I have ever had the pleasure of working with.
After that, the atmosphere of the room became a lot more relaxed as the sisters continued with the massage. Hello chatted quietly to Twilight, the pair of them talking about this and that. I was only half listening to the conversation as Lotus silently massaged away my stress. I couldn't see her face from my downward-facing position, but I could practically feel her stress leaving her as well, as she slowly and gently worked her hooves across my skin, tenderly making sure she got every single knot. She treated me with care, and I could almost feel her happiness as she massaged me into complete bliss. Twilight and I emerged from the spa a few hours later, both of us feeling more relaxed than when we entered. I'm not sure about Twilight, but I don't think I've ever felt this good before. While I wasn't overly stressed before entering the spa, that massage was definitely needed. If I ever ended up going back home, no human hands would ever be able to compare to Lotus's hooves. Behind us, Lotus and Alo waved from the doorway.
Thank you for your business, Miss Sparkle.
Alo called, a smile on her face.
Please come back anytime. And bring your human with you anytime as well.
Lotus added. She wore a larger smile than her sister. Her face seemed to glow with her happiness.
He is always welcome here.
Twilight waved back at the sisters as we walked off. When we were out of the sight of the spa, she turned to look up at me and smirked slightly.
Well, it seems that you've made an unintentional friend.
She giggled, nudging me with her hoof.
You couldn't see her face during the massage, but Lotus couldn't keep her eyes off of you. She seemed taken with how well-behaved you were being.
I rolled my eyes but chuckled all the same. I'm just glad she was able to relax around me. I would hate for her to be uncomfortable around me just because of what some other human has done.
Yes.
Twilight agreed.
It's horrible what happened to her, and I'm glad you were able to help her get her confidence back.
Twilight fell silent as we reached the marketplace. It was late in the afternoon and the stores were beginning to close up for the day. We slowly made our way to the crowd, working our way in the direction of home.
I'm glad we were able to have a nice moment together.
Twilight said as we left the market.
It was relaxing, and you did look like you were enjoying yourself.
I snickered loudly at that, causing Twilight to look at me in confusion. I wasn't the only one enjoying myself. You were moaning rather loudly. Twilight's face turned to crimson and she stumbled slightly. Regaining her footing, she continued to walk along, refusing to meet my eye. I chuckled softly, bumping against the mare. Joking aside, I did enjoy getting that wonderful massage with you. I scratched behind her ears and Twilight leaned into my hand, humming slightly.
I'm sorry you couldn't get your nap today.
Twilight said, still leaning into my hand. Raising an eyebrow, I flipped my free hand around in a gesture of confusion. What do you mean?
I promised you that we would go home after finishing the shopping and you could nap then, but we ended up going over to the spa instead.
I stopped scratching her head and booped her gently on the nose. It was totally worth it. Twilight smiled, gazing up at me. We reached the end of the street and proceeded to turn around the corner.
I concur.
Twilight said, strutting playfully along.
It was rather a relaxing way to spend some time together. Ah!
As we walked around the corner, Twilight plowed headfirst into another pony walking the other way. The other pony stumbled slightly, grunting in pain. Twilight was not so lucky. Losing her balance, she fell backwards onto her back, laying sprawled across the ground. She groaned as she held her head in her hooves.
Ow! One eye hit.
Can't you watch where you're going, you stupid unicorn? Both Twilight and I flinched as the pony Twilight bumped into screeched at us. He was a normal pony, no horn or wings were on him. His coat was a dirty golden color, and he wore a black tuxedo over it. His mane, a slightly darker shade of gold than his coat, was slicked back, giving him a greasy look. He glared down at Twilight with his expression filled with rage.
I'm sorry, sir.
Twilight said as she got back up.
I wasn't looking where I was going.
That much, my dear, is painfully obvious, the stallion growled. The contempt was clear in his voice as he glowered down at Twilight. Call it an instinct, call it common sense, but I had a feeling that nothing we said would have calmed this guy down. Snorting, the stallion ground his teeth in suppressed rage. Slap a pair of wings on a unicorn, and they think they own the entire town. At those words, Twilight gasped, tears forming in her eyes. My haze narrowed as I glared down at the twit. Do you even know who you are dealing with, you stupid unicorn? The stallion roared, stepping towards Twilight. The mare scrambled backwards, her eyes wide. She gaped up at him, mouth opening and closing wordlessly as tears rolled down her face. I am Golden Ingot. I earn more bits in one day than you will ever see in your lifetime. What crawled up his ass and died? I didn't know what this pony's problem was, but there was no reason he should be talking to Twilight like that. I growled at the stallion, but he ignored me, choosing instead to study a smudge of dirt on his suit in disgust. Great. Look what you've done, he snarled at Twilight. You've gotten dirt on my suit, you worthless nag. Do you even know how many bits this was?
I'm sorry.
Twilight squeaked, doing a rather good impression of Fluttershy. It would have been adorable if the situation would have been different. I glanced around quickly. With how loud Ingot was being, we were starting to draw attention. Ponies were stopping and staring at the scene before them. Many were gazing at Ingot with clear disgust, while others looked at Twilight with sympathy. None of them, however, moved to help her. Come on, someone do something! I shift back and forth on my feet, looking from Twilight to Ingot. I growled in frustration. I couldn't do anything without getting in trouble for attacking a pony. Twilight was trying to form words, but Golden wasn't having any of her excuses. He steamrolled right over her. Of course you wouldn't care about that. You have everything handed to you on a silver platter, just like every other hornhead. At that, a gasp went up from the crowd with the ponies watching. I could wager from the reaction that hornhead wasn't something you were supposed to call a unicorn. Golden Ingot didn't seem to care as he continued on. Always using your magic to get ahead in life, not like the rest of us who have to work hard to get where we are. He advanced towards Twilight, with each word slowly closing the gap. In fact, if it weren't for your magic, Princess Sparkle, you would be completely useless. Twilight's eyes opened wider as she gurgled slightly, her brain trying to figure out a proper response. In fact, Golden said, shoving his face right into Twilight's. The only reason you even became Celestia's pet was because she felt sorry for you when she saw you couldn't control your powers. The only reason you are where you are today is because you were a complete and total failure. I could see Twilight break completely with the last statement. She stared forward, eyes blank as rivers of tears ran down her face. Something within me snapped. That, I growled as I felt my anger boil up inside me, is going one step too far. As Golden opened his mouth to spew more filth at Twilight, I made my move. Instantly stepping between him and Twilight, I crouched down and shoved my face into his, snarling loudly as I bared my teeth. Startled, Golden stumbled backwards, his expression changing from anger to fear instantly. Slowly, I raised myself to my full height, which, compared to the ponies, was quite impressive. I glared down at Ingot, my mouth still open in a silent snarl. He gazed back up at me, terror-stricken. Around us, I heard whispers and gasps, but I didn't care. Twilight was hurting, and this ass had overstepped his boundaries. Twilight may be many things, but a failure is not one of them. I didn't care what happened to me after this. I was going to get rid of this bastard no matter what. My face still contorted in rage, I stepped forward, causing the stupid ass to scramble backwards away from me. More gasps sounded, and a pony screamed in the distance. Stay away from me, you filthy animal! Ingot growled at me, trying his hardest to sound tough, but the tremble in his voice and the shaking of his legs gave his fear away. His voice raised in pitch as he continued to try and regain his confidence. Do you even know who you're messing with? I didn't even give him a chance to continue. Slamming my fist into the ground on either side of him, I leaned down and roared. Spittle flew from my mouth as I released my rage for this scum of the earth in one monstrous breath. Closing my mouth, I stared down at the stallion with all the rage of hell itself in my gaze. He cowered beneath me, his entire body shaking as ears splayed back. Silence fell around us as we stared into each other's eyes. His brown eyes gazed fearfully up to mine. He could open and close his mouth once, but no sound came out. Growling, I made to grab the bastard with my hands. When my arm twitched, life seemed to return to the stallion. Shooting out from underneath me, he was gone before I barely even moved. I watched the dust cloud that was goldening it disappear into the distance. Turning, I gazed across the crowd of ponies that had gathered around us. They gazed up at me with a mixture of horror and wonder. With my heart slowly rising into my throat, I tried my best to ignore the stares. Swallowing nervously, I turned my attention to Twilight. She was still sitting there, staring blankly into space. Her eyes were red and the fur on her cheeks were matted from her tears. Ignoring the whispers from the ponies around us, I slowly approached my distressed friend and owner. Reaching Twilight, I sat down in front of her and pulled her into a hug, nuzzling the side of her face gently. My face became wet with her tears, but I didn't care. She flinched slightly at the initial contact, but didn't shy away. Slowly, life seemed to return to her eyes. She slowly raised her head and gazed into my eyes. I could see the pain in hers, the hurt from everything Golden Ingot had said. But there was also something else there as well. A silent thanks for what I had done. I pulled her closer and she lowered her head, burying her face in my shoulder. She wept as I held her. From the crowd of ponies around us, the sound of stomping began. The sound grew louder and louder until every pony around us was stomping on the ground. It took me a second to realize what they were doing. They were applauding. I didn't know if they were applauding me for what I had done, but I didn't care. All I cared about was comforting Twilight. The applause died down as Twilight and I just sat there, holding each other. The crowd slowly began to disperse. Some stayed behind to inform the guards, who had finally shown up, what had happened. Luckily, these were the same guards that had tested me after the first incident with Rainbow Dash. After getting the story from several different ponies, the guards decided that I had acted in self-defense when I sensed that my owner was in danger. So I was not considered a threat to the ponies, and they did not need to take me into custody. Hooray for small victories. The entire time that the guards were doing their investigation, Twilight continued to cry into my shoulder. The day had been going so well too. Why did it have to end this way? One of the guards, a Pegasus mare with a pink mane, found a blanket and covered us with it, but other than that they left us alone. It was probably best that way. Twilight was too distraught to deal with anything right now, and they still, luckily, thought I was just a stupid human. By the time the guards finished and left, Twilight had calmed down. Sniffling, she slowly pulled away from me, rubbing her eyes with a huff, and she hiccuped slightly.
Thanks,
she croaked, her voice cracking slightly. I nodded, a strange smile on my face. I just stared at the ground, looking broken. It tore my heart to see her like this. Deciding that it was up to me to cheer her up, I cupped her face in my hands, wiping her tears away with my thumbs. I stroked her cheeks gently and caringly. Despite my attempts, Twilight still refused to meet my gaze. Releasing her face, I leaned back slightly and sighed. Smiling, I waved my hand slightly to catch her attention. Her ear flicked, letting me know she was paying attention. Hey, you want to go see if Sugar Cube Corner's still open? And maybe talk to Pinky? Twilight shook her head, sniffing again. A stray tear fell from her face to the dirt below. Chewing on my cheek, I tilt my head to the side, thinking. Do you want to go find Fluttershy and talk to her? Another shake of the head, and another sniffle as Twilight continued to stare at the ground, her ears splayed back. I sat with her, trying to think of some way to cheer her up. Suddenly, my intestines gave a low rumble, followed by a slight pressure in my lower abdomen. I looked down to my stomach, eyebrows raised. As I gazed down at my gurgling stomach, an idea popped into my head. Grinning, I raised my head and looked at Twilight. You want me to take a shit on Golden Ingot's lawn? There was a slight pause, then Twilight nodded her head. She looked up at me, no longer crying, but her eyes were still red. I smiled at her and got to my feet, and she shakily rose to her hooves. I held up my leash for her and she took it under magic. Okay, let's go take a shit on Golden Ingot's lawn. We began to walk down the road, slowly making our way along. As we walked, I placed my hand on Twilight's head, gently stroking her disheveled mane. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a smile begin to spread across Twilight's face. Quietly, she began to hum happily to herself as the sun slowly began to slip beneath the horizon, and the first star appeared in the evening sky. Damn. What an asshole for being, just being such a cunt because somebody bumped into you like that. I'm sure none of my viewers are like that at all. God, I hope so. You know, it's a little bit of an overreaction, I believe. However, what I also believe is that my Patreons are far too kind. Thank you, my tier 1s, Balance Kindness, Chase Lemaster, Dreamless Portal, Hyperlink, Jason, Night Game, Macarino, Pony Entertainment, Starlight Blaze, and Rainflicker. My tier 2s, Captain Blueshadow, Chaotic Mist, The Animated Ghost, DJMX 2000, Elemental Wolf, H1 Wolf King, HK4AK, Texture Mackenzie, McColas, Nocturne, Papa Lennon, Redeemer of Dark, Solus Eclipse, Sword Brother Mordred, and RD Bryant. Big thank you to my previous Titan tiers, Dark Guardian, Danish Dash, and Maverick. Thank you. And a large thank you to my current Titan tiers, User 1842 and Silent Titan. I appreciate you guys' support so much and it means a ton to me. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.